Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Reperon, and today we're going to be doing another Dead by Daylight tier list. This is going to be how fun are each of the killers to play against as the survivors. So I'll be just ranking these based on my own opinion of how fun I think they are to go against. Some of these killers are super fun, others can be very frustrating, and it also depends on very much who's actually playing the killer, because realistically any killer could just tunnel and face camp and do some other kind of scummy things, but let's assume that the killers aren't doing that and just playing more normally. So let's go over each of these and I'll be ranking them based on my own opinion. First up we have Blight, and Blight is a really fun killer to play against actually, because sometimes you get Blights that are bouncing all over the place and then still manage to hit you. Sometimes you get Blights that are bouncing all over the place and end up on the other side of the map because they lost track of you. I've definitely been that Blight before, and Blight is never like a boring match to play against, I would say. Whether the Blight is really good or really bad, it's always entertaining to watch. So I would put Blight up into S tier. Next up we got Hag, and Hag is usually not all that fun to play against. The way that you beat Hag is usually you go out and harass her and get rid of her traps early on, either with flashlights or by triggering them yourself, and that's not always a fun way to play. Almost all of Hag's games are really slow. The one thing that Hag does have going for her is that she's still probably one of the killers that jump scares me the most. So I think just because of that, I would put her up into C tier, because that can be rather fun. You don't know exactly where you're stepping, where she put down traps. Next we have Bubba, and Bubba can be really fun to play against. You can try to, turn into loops faster with him. You could try hopping into lockers, see what he does. Some Bubbas just sit in front and just rev up their chainsaw a bunch. Some Bubbas bump into it and then, wait to try to see if you come out or if you can jump out before then. So you can do a lot of things with Bubba. It's just that there's also a lot of Bubbas that like to face camp a lot. So that's kind of why Bubba can be annoying at times, because once you down somebody and put somebody on a hook, it's pretty much impossible to get them off the hook without somebody else going down or without multiple people going down. For Bubba, just proxy camping the hook or just sitting there in front of the hook and camping it, face and face, that can be pretty boring. But if Bubba's not doing that, and he's chasing people around normally, he can be a lot of fun to play against. I would put him up into A tier. Up next we have Billy. Billy's another really fun killer to play against, because you don't know exactly when he's going to use the chainsaw, if he's going to hold it longer, if he's going to just go right away, what type of add-ons he's running, if he can curve a little bit better, if you can get around something tight enough to where he can't curve into you, or to where he's going to try to come through a window, maybe use bamboozle. There's just so many things that make Billy rather fun to play against, because he can never really insta down more than one person at a time. He can only ever insta down one person, and that makes it a little bit less annoying. He could still face camp, he could still tunnel people off the hook and stuff like that. That is a strong way to play Billy. But if he's not doing that, then Billy's probably S tier along with Blight. He is super fun to play against a lot of the time too. It's just not a whole lot of people play either of these killers. Up next we have Wraith, and Wraith kind of varies. It depends on which add-ons he's running. If he's got like all the information add-ons to where he can see you when he's stealth and stuff like that, it can be rather annoying. Same with if he's running the Silent Bell, then that can just throw it off. If he's running like the Bone Clapper, that one kind of throws you off, but that's more of a fun one because you never know exactly where he's coming from. So you may be running into him, you may be running away from him. He can have some fun chases and stuff, but a lot of the time Wraith can be a little bit annoying. I would probably put Wraith into B tier. I think I'm okay with most of the games that I get Wraith. Next we have Demo, and Demo's a really fun one to play against. Pretty much everybody loves playing against Demo. Pretty much everybody likes playing as Demo too. He's probably the most balanced killer in the game, even though he is still pretty strong with his shred and with his portals. He can move around the map really well. But at never, any point do I ever feel like I'm at a huge disadvantage against a Demogorgon, unless he just face camps me. In which case, yeah, but that could happen with any killer. So I think fun to play against. I'd put Demogorgon up into S tier. Pyramid Head can be kind of fun if you're just trying to bait the lines out and if he's throwing a bunch of lines. But if he's not, and he's just playing smart, where he's just, dragging the sword through a loop, banding in the loop, or just taking the torment, can be kind of annoying. He's not always the most fun to play against a lot of the time, but I think he's another okay killer. I'd probably put him into B tier 2 to play against. Next we have Trapper. Trapper kind of varies, because a lot of the time you don't see Trapper for pretty much like the first half of the match or the first third of the match, where he's off just setting up traps. And if you know where he's setting up traps, then you know which areas to avoid, as well as if you have other add-ons, like if you bring a map, you know where his traps are, in which case he's not all that threatening. If you know not to loop around like the Killer Shack, He's also not all that threatening. Other than that, he just kind of chases you normally. So he's okay unless you run into traps, which can be kind of annoying. I'd put Trapper probably into C tier as well. Next we got Pig, and Pig's another fun one to play against because if you're like me and you play Pig a good amount, you know when she can use a dash to hit you, if she's going to try to double back on dashes. That can be really fun if the Pig is doing a whole bunch of dashes. That can be a super fun game to play, but if they're not and they're just chasing you around normally, it's pretty much a normal killer, that is. And then you still have to run away and do the boxes, and if the Pig's kind of camping boxes or checking boxes pretty often, or continually goes after you once you already have the bear trap on your head, that can be pretty annoying. Assuming we have a Pig that's doing a decent amount of dashes, can be pretty fun. I'd put her into B tier as well. And next we got Huntress. Huntress can be another one that's really fun because you can actually dodge her hatchets, which is pretty awesome. You can run around loops pretty well. She can't always hit you in certain loops. You can do some kind of sneaky things like throwing down the pallet early and then crouching next to it so that she can't hit you from most angles. If she's trying to go for really long range shots, that can be a fun, pretty much game of chicken where you're just running out in the open and she's trying to hit you. So there can be a lot of fun things about Huntress. It's not super fun if she decides to put you in basement and camp you, because she does have a really strong basement game, and she can just, sit and wait at the top of the stairs with hatchets, and if you guys run up there, she'll just be hitting you. That can be kind of annoying, but again, assuming we're out running around the majority of the time and Huntress is just throwing hatchets, she is pretty fun. I'd put her up in A tier. It's also really nice that they took away the iridescent hatchets to where you can't have 3 of them anymore, because that was really annoying when you played against a Huntress running that. Next is Oni. Oni's another really fun one to play against, because if you're playing against a good Oni that knows how to kind of curb and kind of run along the side of walls and stuff, it can be pretty scary. It can be really fun to actually run away from him then, because it is pretty terrifying because he could just one-shot you. Also, if you're playing against really bad Oni, it can be super fun where you're just seeing him bounce off of everything, run around, not really knowing the timing of his Kanabo when he swings. So you can kind of bait it out and spin around him. Pretty fun to play against Oni. He'd be another killer I'd probably put up into S tier. Next we have Deathslinger, and Deathslinger is usually regarded as one of the least fun killers to play against, which I understand. It's pretty much impossible to predict where he's going to shoot with his harpoon gun. You get that split second of when he's pulling up the gun, but even then he could be faking that and then just walk right up to you, so you can't even necessarily dead hard to safety that way unless you're just at a super safe loop or something. He can get you through a lot of loops. He has a small tear radius, so he can sneak up on you fairly easily. A lot of people say that he doesn't necessarily have skill, which I disagree with. He does require skill, but it's not necessarily skills that you only learn in Dead by Daylight. It's skills that are applied from other games like FPS games. So if you're playing against somebody that is really good at FPS games, or at least pretty decent at FPS games, they can do pretty well as Deathslinger, and that can be rather annoying. If Deathslinger's going for a bunch of trick shots, though, that is actually really fun to play against, because then you guys can kind of, again, similar to Huntress, you guys can kind of play chicken around certain obstacles, see if he can actually land a shot through something like the bars on the tractors or on the wagons at the farm, or, in between hay bales or something like that, or landed in between the cracks at shack. All of those can be super fun to play against if Deathslinger's playing that way. But if he's not and he's just walking right up and hitting you and then shooting you as you go, it can be pretty frustrating. So I'd put Deathslinger probably down into D tier as fun to play against. He's usually not all that fun to play against. Trixx is another one that's not super fun to play against, because the best way to play against him is just get to a high wall loop and just sit there and run around in circles around it. Either he has to chase you around and hit you and then you go to another loop, or he's going to sit there and try to throw his knives, and you'll likely not hit most of his knives then, because the structure will be blocking him, or it'll take him longer to land those knives on you. Then you take off running to the next loop. And if you get caught out in the open with him, he can down you extremely fast, because he only needs to hit 12 of his knives now. So that can be pretty annoying, as well as if he just wants to camp hooks. He's quite good at that too, especially if he has main event up. I honestly don't think he's as annoying to play against as Deathslinger, though. So I guess I'd put him higher up into D tier. Next we got Plague. Plague is another killer that's not always super fun to play against, because if you're playing against a good Plague, that can be an issue, especially if you're playing solo queue like I usually do, where then nobody's communicating, or there's very minimal communications, like, Kindred or Better Together or some perks like that are going off. Then you have no clue what the rest of the team is planning on doing. Are they planning on cleansing the whole time? Are they planning on not cleansing? If one person starts cleansing, then it's probably best to get everybody to start cleansing. If nobody's cleansing, then it's probably best to not cleanse. And that can be kind of frustrating. That's more of a solo queue experience, though. If you're playing in a team, I imagine you could coordinate it much better, and it would be less annoying then to play against Plague. But I'd probably put Plague somewhere into, like, high end of C tier. I usually don't have a problem playing games with Plague, but you also don't see her very often, so Michael's another killer that's not always super fun to play against because he has a small tier radius, and he can potentially just come around a corner, stalk you to 100, and get to tier 3, and then just insta-down you. That's pretty annoying, and that is a really effective way to play Michael. Same with a lot of loops. You're probably going to go down against Michael if he has tier 3, because all he has to do is just be patient around that, just keep running around you. Eventually he's going to get Bloodlust and catch up to you and one-hit you. If you can keep getting to safe loops, Michael's not all that scary. Sometimes it just feels like there's not a whole lot of input on your end, where it's just Michael kind of has control of this. And I guess I'd put Michael probably into D tier as well. He's not always the most fun to play against, unless they're running like Scratch Mirror Michael or something like that, and then it's just like a jump scare Michael, and then they're actually really fun to play against, because at least then you're not getting insta-down or anything like that. He's just mostly jump scaring you and smacking you once or something like that, maybe pulling you off a generator and kind of getting a one hit on you then. Next we have Nurse. Nurse can be fun to play against, but she can also be really difficult to play against too. It depends on how well the Nurse player plays. If they're extremely good at Nurse, then she's not really all that fun to play against, because she can just insta-down the whole team pretty much, or down the team so fast that you can't do anything, and it's just like, okay, well, GG's, there was no beating that. Or she could be the opposite of that and be missing her blinks constantly. I would say the majority of Nurse players that you're going to go against aren't those incredibly good Nurse players, but when you do go against them, it feels like you can't really do much. So I'd probably put Nurse into B tier, because again, if you go against those really, really good players, she's probably down to like C or D tier. If you're just playing against the average Nurse player, she's probably A or B tier. She's usually pretty fun to play against. Nemesis can also be kind of a fun one to play against, because you never know if he's going to use his tentacle or if he's going to try to punch you. His zombies can also be kind of fun, as they can be a bit of a distraction, although on small maps they can be extremely annoying. But even if Nemesis isn't doing well, his zombies can somewhat make up for that just with distracting people. So it can be a little bit annoying then, but on like open maps, I don't have any problem with Nemesis, and I'd probably put him into like B tier. Ghostface is next. Ghostface can be kind of fun to play against. You don't know where he's going to be, you don't know when he's going to pop up, but again, he's kind of like Michael, where if you weren't aware of where he was and he stalks you up to 99%, and then just insta-downs you, that can be really annoying. He can also have some really busted mechanics similar to Michael, where sometimes you might reveal him and you don't even see him, and same with the other way, where he could potentially 100% you without ever really seeing you. If his mechanics worked better, I would say Ghostface would be less annoying, but in his current state, he is kind of annoying, so I'd probably put him on the low end of C tier. Legion's usually kind of a boring killer to play against, because the best way to play against Legion is everybody just spread out. Nobody stay together, which can be frustrating in solo queue, because half the time I have one or two people just following me super close. I'm not entirely sure why. Sometimes it's when I'm streaming and people are just in the stream and messing around or something. But even when I'm playing, offline by myself, people still sometimes just follow next to you, even when they have something like a Legion in the match. And the way that you beat Legion is you pretty much just spread out. You are okay with being injured, and you just sit and work on gens, and you crank them out one at a time until you get it done. At least Legion does let you have a chasing phase, though, so he can't just constantly follow you around and stab you with his frenzy. And you can also kind of juke his frenzy, which is fun to do. I'd put Legion probably on the low end of C tier as well. Then we've got Spirit, and, well, most survivors do not like playing against Spirit. Spirit is not very fun to play against because there's not a whole lot you can do against her. If you get to any loop, you're kind of at an unsafe loop, and you're pretty much just doing a 50-50 at that point. The best thing that you can do against Spirit right then is throw down the pallet. If she breaks it, you run to the next place and you throw down the next pallet. If she doesn't break it and she goes to use her power, you just wait patiently and you try to run from one side to the other. And hopefully you were correct, and hopefully she didn't just stand there. You don't ever want to try to jump over the pallet, though, if she's just standing there, because if that happens, she can just grab you and it'll count as an insta-down. So you always want to be trying to move around and sometimes doubling back to it, because if she did use her power, then you can get to that side of the loop. If she didn't, then she might still hit you on that side of the loop that you ran to, but you can at least run to the next loop. And that's pretty much the best way to play against her. If you're running Iron Will and if you're running Lucky Break, especially in combination, you can do well against Spirit, but that's not really a fun combination to be running against every single killer and in every single game. So Spirit down into D tier as well. Up next is Clown. Clown's another killer that's not super fun to play against because he just slows you down with his bottles, it kind of messes with your vision, and there's really no outplay going on at all with Clown. The way that you beat Clown at pretty much all of the loops is the same way you beat a couple other killers, and that is just run to the loop, drop the pallet. That's it. Then you wait for him to either kick the pallet and you leave, or he tries to throw gas on one side and you just keep running the loop until he eventually hits you, and then you run to the next loop and so on. Or you try to run from one loop, assuming there's something else nearby, either another structure, another jungle gym, something like Shack, and you try to hop into that, and you try to make the loop as long as you can until you eventually you're going to get hit, and then you go to the next loop, and you continue on this way. So it's kind of a slow process. So Clown will also go down into D tier. Next we got Twins, and Twins is another killer that's not super fun to play against. Usually the way that most Twins players will play is the most efficient way, which is tunneling and camping. Both of those are very annoying to play against, and yeah, it can be fun to try to, dodge Victor and kick Victor. And if the Twins are playing more in a fun way, like they're sending out Victor pretty often, they're trying to go for these grabs and you're able to kick Victor and then they chase you around to Charlotte for a while, sure, she can actually be a pretty fun killer to play against. Most Twins don't play like that, though. Most Twins will focus down one person, put them on a hook, keep Charlotte nearby, send Victor out to go harass somebody else. Or they'll do the opposite, keep Victor there so that they can kind of monitor whoever's on the hook, and if anybody's coming to save them, and then you go after somebody as Charlotte, try to injure them, and then try to send Victor out to harass them some more. And this is not a super fun way to play, because the best way to beat this is just spread out. And if you're already aware that Twins is going to be in the game, taking something like luck offerings and extra perks to unhook yourself, like slippery meat and other perks like that, that's probably the best way to beat her, just because she can't defend all the hooks that way. So, again, kind of an annoying killer to play against, and usually not all that fun. I would put Twins also into D tier. Freddy's also a killer that's usually not all that fun to play against, unless she's running Dream Pallets, in which case he can actually be pretty fun to play against them, because you're never really sure if the pallets in front of you are real and if you can trust them. But at the same time, you almost always are aware that most of the pallets, at least starting at the match, are going to be real. It's just that this builds up over time, and that can actually be kind of scary, because you might see a bunch of pallets in one area that maybe nobody's went to, and they're all actually real, but you just avoid it because you know that if you stop at any of those, Freddy's going to hit you. That can be pretty annoying. If he's running the regular blood pool Freddy, and if he's playing effective as Freddy, it's usually not that fun to play as Freddy, because he's just going to put blood pools at either side of the pallet, force you to run through one, force you to run through the other, and then hit you. And then you're just going to have to move on. Or you're going to have to get to a loop and you're going to drop the pallet immediately, in which case you're going to play it just the way that you played against Clown. You're going to try to run away from him, and if he hits you, you run to the next one. Otherwise, if he breaks the pallet, you just run to the next one, drop the next pallet, and try to play that structure the same way. So it's not really a super fun way to play against Freddy. Probably also into D tier. And then finally we have Doctor. And Doctor is yet another killer that's not really fun to play against, because the way that you play Doctor is usually you just follow somebody and you keep zapping them until they're at an unsafe window or an unsafe pallet, and then he hits you. And if you get to any sort of pallet, you pretty much just drop it down and play it the same way you play against Clown. You wait for Doctor to break it, or you leave, or you wait until he hits you eventually around the loop, and then you leave and you go to another loop. Not really all that engaging, and the madness can be rather annoying as the survivors, because you're dealing with that. You're also dealing with more difficult skill checks then, and sometimes other effects like having the red light follow you around, having the Doctor clones kind of give away your positions. It's just not really a fun killer to play against, since there's not a whole lot of counterplay to it other than just playing super safe. So probably into D tier as well. So I guess this is where I would put all of the killers in terms of how fun they are to go against. Plenty of them are quite fun to play against. Some of them not so much, but most of them are for specific reasons, or because it's for the same reason every time, just that it's not that fun to play against them in terms of, running pallets and stuff like that. So I hope you enjoyed this list. If you guys did, and you're not subscribed, be sure that you get subscribed. That way you get notifications whenever I post these videos. Thanks to all the supporters of this channel. This includes my YouTube members and my patrons over on Patreon. If you would like to be a part of those, links are down in the description where you guys can go off and get access to them. And you'll get access to early videos too. If you'd like to see my other Dead by Daylight content, be sure to click over here on this video. That'll take you to a full playlist of them. And I will talk to all of you guys next time. Till then, stay cool, and bye!